I now call to order the Committee on House Administration's Subcommittee on Oversight for today's hearing on the Library of Congress. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members may submit any materials that they wish to be included therein. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. The witnesses may take their seats. Thank you. Due to some technical difficulties, we are not able to broadcast today's hearing. We're hoping that that will be corrected before the hearing is over. Are we up and running now? Okay, forget this note. We're alive. Established in 1800 to serve Congress, the library is the world's largest, with over 150 million items in its collections. In fiscal year 2011 alone, it received 763,000 congressional reference requests and delivered to Congress more than 1 million research products. The 4 service units before us today represent arguably the core of the library: the Law Library, the Congressional Research Service, CRS, the Copyright Office, and Library Services fulfill vital needs and services to this Congress and to the American people. The Law Library ensures Congress has the necessary documents for domestic and international legal sources that it needs for its deliberations. The Congressional Research Service has the important responsibility of assisting Congress in researching the legislative issues before it in a nonpartisan and objective fashion. The Copyright Office, responsible for our national copyright system, processes approximately 670,000 registration applications annually. It is also responsible for adjudicating copyright disputes, making its services indispensable to United States industries relying on the protection of their intellectual property. Library Services oversees the backbone of the library. It's charged with maintaining the world's largest collection. This unit is responsible for acquisitions and all cataloging. However, in this fiscal environment, the library has seen its budget reduced, like the rest of the country, and this Congress has been forced to increase operational efficiency while maintaining the ability to serve its core function and its clients. Today, we look forward to hearing from these 4 service unit leaders, all of whom arrived recently in their positions. These 4 units of the library comprise almost 70% of the library's budget. Thus, it will be important to hear from our witnesses how they are managing these resources, how they are finding greater efficiencies, and how they will continue to meet their collective and individual missions in the future. I want to thank each of my colleagues for being here today. I would now like to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren from California, for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Ranking Member Lofgren.
Thank you, Chairman Gingrey, and I would ask unanimous consent that my full statement be made a part of the record.
Without objection.
I would simply say that, of course, we all appreciate the work that the employees of the Library of Congress do every day on behalf not only of the Congress but of the American people. I think this oversight hearing is an important one. As we know, Dr. Billington has been the librarian since 1987. He's outlasted 4 U.S. presidents, and there have been a high number of turnovers, as you've mentioned, at the division level. With so many divisions in a state of transition, I think it's a good time for us to check in to learn the vision of each of them and to make sure that they are in accord with the vision that the Congress on a bipartisan basis has on behalf of the nation. So I look forward to the hearing, and thank you for holding this. I think it's an important one, and it's the first one we've had in all the years I've been on the committee. So I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Any other members of the committee have an opening statement? Okay. I would like now to introduce our witnesses. David Mao became the 23rd Law Librarian of Congress on January the 4th this year. Before being appointed by Dr. Billington, Librarian Mao had been the Deputy Law Librarian since June of 2010. Prior to coming to the Law Library, Mr. Mao had a 5-year tenure in the Congressional Research Service. He held positions at Georgetown University and practiced law. He earned his library degree from the Catholic University of America. Dr. Mary Mazanek was appointed Director of the Congressional Research Service on December the 5th, 2011. Dr. Mazanek had been Acting Director of CRS and has advanced degrees in law and medicine. Congratulations. From 2002 to 2010, she worked with the United States Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, where she served most recently as a Deputy Assistant Secretary and Director of the Office of Medicine, Science, and Public Health. Dr. Mazanek has been a Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellow and a Senior Policy Analyst at the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission, MedPAC. She received her Doctor of Medicine from Case Western Reserve University Medical School and a Juris Doctorate from Case Western Reserve University Law School. Maria Palante was appointed the 12th Register of Copyrights and Director of the United States Copyright Office last June. Register Palante has held several key positions within the Copyright Office. She has been Acting Register, the Associate Register of Policy and International Affairs, Deputy General Counsel, and Policy Advisor. In addition, she was Intellectual Property Counsel and Director of the Licensing Group for the Guggenheim Museums. Last but not least, Roberta Schaefer is the Associate Librarian for Library Services. A former Fulbright Senior Scholar, Ms. Schaefer has had a distinguished career as a practicing librarian and as a library science educator. Prior to being appointed, Ms. Schaefer served as Mr. Mao's predecessor as his 22nd Law Librarian. Associate Librarian Schaefer has also been the Executive Director of the library's Federal Library and Information Network. We thank you all for being here today. The committee has received your written testimonies, and at the appropriate time, I'll recognize each of you for 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission. To help you keep time, we have a timing device near the witness table. I don't think I've yet figured out quite how to use it, so I'll try to be rather generous in the 5 minutes. The device is supposed to emit a green light for 4 minutes, and then it turns yellow for 1 minute. When the light turns red, it means that your time has expired. The gentlewoman or the gentleman's time has expired. I've just got a kind of a light gavel. I've never used it before, so we'll be okay with you. Law Librarian Mao, we will start with you, and would you please proceed with your testimony?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to speak about leadership transition in the Law Library of Congress. Although only in the position since January, I'm nearing 7 years of service in the Library of Congress and have seen a re-energized and revitalized law library emerge under the direction of my predecessor, Roberta Schaefer. I've assumed the leadership of a service unit with unique collections and expertise that not only plays a vital role in supporting the work of Congress, but also advances the knowledge of laws and legal information worldwide. The highest priority of the Law Library is to provide the Congress with timely, authoritative, and confidential foreign legal analysis and information. For example, in 2011, the Law Library staff prepared many legal research reports, special studies, and memoranda in response to congressional inquiries. More specifically, foreign law specialists and analysts provided foreign and comparative law reports related to a range of current U.S. legislative issues, including banking, citizenship, immigration, taxation, and terrorism. Current priorities during this fiscal year include working with other organizations within the library to design a next-generation legislative information system. Additionally, the Law Library is collaborating with other parts of the library and external entities regarding the digitization of historical legislative documents. The Law Library's reading room is currently undergoing a renovation that will include technologies so that clients may better access virtual collections and utilize improved study space to access physical collections. In the renovated reading room, Law Library staff will be able to train members and staff on Thomas, give topical seminars, and offer briefings on a wide range of foreign legal issues. Later this year, the Law Library will launch law.gov as it pursues a long-term strategic plan aligned with Library of Congress-wide digital initiatives, which will afford Congress and other constituents the benefits of more timely, targeted, and complete legal knowledge. Going forward, in fiscal 2013, the Law Library will continue to classify the 800,000 volumes to Class K to the extent the budget will allow. Working within the broader Library of Congress web enhancement process, the Law Library will continue to establish law.gov as the vehicle for providing access to digital legal information. Together with other library service units, the Law Library also will continue to coordinate training that the library provides to the Congress and staff. The Law Library's priorities are not without fiscal constraints and challenges, however. Reduction in the Library of Congress budget hampers creation of a workforce with the skills necessary to implement the envisioned future mission of the Law Library. Because the Law Library relies heavily on contractors, a reduced budget means bids for contractual services with decreased labor hours, which lead to lower collection maintenance activity levels and a decreased ability to preserve a backlog of official foreign nations' laws, regulations, and legal information published exclusively in newspaper form. The Law Library also lacks storage space for its vast collections, which significantly impedes the Law Library's ability to maintain a comprehensive and current legal collection. Moreover, the Law Library is currently able to house less than 50% of its rare items in storage conditions that meet Library of Congress security requirements. To provide proper security as well as environmental controls for this material, a new vault for Law Library rare materials must be constructed in the Madison building. Despite the challenges that it faces, the Law Library will continue to provide the Congress with accurate, authoritative, and timely foreign legal analysis, and will continue to acquire, preserve, and make accessible world-class legal collections. In a budget-constrained environment, the Law Library will leverage all Library of Congress resources and collaborate both internally and externally to ensure that it maintains the highest quality staff and delivers products and services efficiently and in a cost-efficient manner. The Law Library of Congress is committed to maintaining its unique role as a leader for the world's legal and information communities. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Mao. Dr. Maznek.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the subcommittee, I too want to thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress. I am honored to have been appointed the CRS Director by Dr. Billington last December. My transition to the Director of CRS has been seamless, due in large part to the excellent, dedicated, and talented staff working at all levels throughout the service. My vision is that CRS remains Congress's primary source for the analysis and information that it needs to perform its legislative functions. As you recall, CRS's work is driven by the core values of timeliness, authoritativeness, objectivity, balance, confidentiality, and nonpartisanship. CRS recently completed its annual legislative planning process, identifying over 160 issues before Congress and organizing its product line and its web resources around those issues. We have also met with the leadership offices to ensure that CRS is well positioned to support Congress's legislative agenda. Additionally, in conjunction with this committee, we are beginning our planning for the CRS seminar for new members of the 113th Congress. The last seminar was attended by a record number of new House members, and we expect another productive exchange with the freshman class of the next Congress. Looking back over last year, in fiscal year 2011, CRS completed more than 760,000 responses and services for members and committees. This number includes analysis and information requests, product requests, electronic services, and seminars. Since becoming director, I have made it one of my top priorities to meet personally with members, committees, and senior congressional staff. The purpose of these meetings is to elicit feedback and suggestions about how we are serving the Congress and how we can do our job better and more efficiently. Since the beginning of the 112th Congress, I have held meetings with nearly 30 members and 85 senior staffers. The meetings have reaffirmed the findings of the 2010 Customer Satisfaction Study, which found that a majority of CRS clients are very satisfied with our products and the services that we provide. But there is always room for improvement, and we can do better. Since becoming director, I have also sought the input of CRS staff at all levels, initiating a series of open staff meetings and brown bag lunches, inviting staff to raise questions and concerns, and to brainstorm with me and offer ideas about how we can do our work better and more efficiently. In addition, on a regular basis, I meet with the president of the Congressional Research Employees Association. Turning to fiscal consideration, I am continuously examining our budget priorities, and I've directed my senior management team to review our current organization to determine where we can continue to achieve efficiencies and synergies between offices and divisions. CRS is operating at its lowest staff level in more than 3 decades. As of March 31st, 2012, CRS had 618 employees, a decline of 53 persons in the last 2 years. Although this decrease in manpower means that the service has limited flexibility to develop new analytical capacity in increasingly complex areas such as healthcare, energy development, military weaponry, and financial regulation, I am focused on maintaining the highest level of service for the Congress. To this end, one of my top priorities is to strategically reshape the workforce while maintaining broad analytical capacity. CRS will continue to work with its congressional clients to scope out and prioritize needs and to meet these needs in a timely manner. While we are operating under an increased budget pressure, especially in technology and research materials, we recognize that it is not just our analysis that we provide, but it's also how we provide it to a 21st century Congress. Our technology needs to evolve as Congress has evolved, and we are committed to making improvements in this area. In closing, I want to thank you once again for this invitation to appear before you. Together with my colleagues at the library, we are ready to serve the Congress and the legislative process, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maznak. Ms. Palante.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Lofgren, Mr. Nugent, I also want to thank you for the invitation to appear today. I also want to apologize for my voice. I was traveling last week and unfortunately came back with an ill-timed head cold. And
it sounds great. Proceed.
And took a lot of cold medicine, so let's see what that does to me. I also want to correct a typo in my written statement. It states that my predecessor retired on December 31st, 2011, but in fact it was 2010. At the outset, I'd like to say what a tremendous privilege it is to serve as the Register of Copyrights at this point in time. The registration and the recordation functions of the office have become critically important to the public. At the same time, the legal framework by which authors create and disseminate their works and libraries and members of the public access them requires updating for the online environment. When Dr. Billington appointed me to the position last year, I was quite honored by his trust in me and deeply appreciative of the opportunity to serve the library, the Congress, the copyright community, and the public. I am joined at the office by a very talented staff, many of whom have specialized knowledge and training. I respect and admire them for their dedication to the nation. I also have tremendous respect for the position that I hold, and I am aware of the legacies of those who have served as registrar before me. Ms. Peters directed the office for 16 years and served on the staff for more than 40. Other registrars have served fewer years, but during critical periods of policy reform. In fact, every register since 1897 has had to navigate a complex combination of policy and operations issues, and this has already proven to be the case for me as well. Since my appointment in June, my colleagues and I have been extremely busy on two fronts. First, meeting the day-to-day demands of our public services and policy duties under the statute. And second, evaluating our core operations in preparation for the future. The registration and recordation programs of the Copyright Office form the largest public database of copyright information in the world. Information that is helpful to commerce, to innovation, and to licensing. That said, unlike the patent system, registration in the copyright context is not required as a condition of legal protection under the law. It is therefore necessary to review the legal incentives that we provide to authors to entice them to participate in the system and to analyze and properly calibrate the office's fees for services so as not to dissuade registration. Last October, I released a 2-year plan entitled Priorities and Special Projects of the U.S. Copyright Office. This document transparently describes our workload, including trade and policy work, and reflects our commitment to prepare for future challenges, including in the registration system. In addition to our normal workload, we have 10 special committees working on issues that are pertinent to the future, on which hundreds of employees from across departments are working collaboratively. I want to underscore what that really means at a staff level. In an environment where people are already doing more than their share, I have asked them, as the new register, to do even more, and they have responded with enthusiasm and pride. Many of the projects will require a multi-year commitment and sustained funding if implemented. Others are entrepreneurial and could lead to partnerships with the private sector. In summary, my vision for the U.S. Copyright Office is to position it to be highly efficient and effective over the next several decades. To do this, we have 5 challenges. We must first attract and retain a skilled and experienced staff, especially in law and information technology. Second, we must make technical improvements to the registration and recordation systems while updating the underlying legal incentives. Third, we must redesign both the presentation and the usability of our public databases and records. Fourth, we must fulfill the education and training activities that are expected of the office. And fifth, we must continue to serve the Congress and departments in the executive branch through policy expertise as required by the Copyright Act. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the subcommittee's interest in the U.S. Copyright Office, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Belanti. And Ms. Schaefer, tell us about library services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will gladly do that. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Lofgren, subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to discuss my transition to Associate Librarian for Library Services and an overview of my unit. I am no stranger to the library. Preparation for my current position began over 30 years ago when I first came to the library as a law student. At that point, I resolved that I would someday return in a leadership role. Now, as Associate Librarian for Library Services, I am humbled by the responsibility of the job I have held for just over 100 days, and always try to hearken back to my own experiences as a library customer. I am grateful to Dr. Billington, Librarian of Congress, for his confidence in my leadership abilities, the library services staff for their support and commitment to the library, and my peer group here for their collegiality. We all work closely together with the librarian, chief of staff, to provide services to the American people, your constituents, and to position the library for its long-term viability. Library Services is the largest organizational unit with a staff of approximately 1,500, 40% of the total headcount, and 42 divisions. It is responsible for the library's vast collections. 4.7 million items were just added within the year. As well, library services selected from copyright receipts, one important source of collections, more than 700,000 copies of works with a net value of $31 million. Some 11,000 new items from all sources come into the library each day. Library Services acquires materials, catalogs them, makes them accessible, and preserves them. Staff helps the library's users navigate these collections. They answer questions in person, over the phone, via the internet, mail, virtually all means of inquiry. In 2011, we provided reference services directly to more than 500,000 individuals. The high demand for our resources is also underscored by the fact that the library's website had 512 million page views last year. Part of planning for the future is anticipating needs of users within the context of a rapidly changing technological landscape. As the world's best source of authoritative and authentic information, the Library of Congress can be an integral part of everyday life, wherever and whenever information is deployed, except when driving. From my perspective, I see a number of challenges before us. First, space. Finding and properly managing space for our constantly expanding collection and format. Second, acquiring material that spans the ages and all disciplines in almost all languages, over 460 at last count, and collecting from remote but strategic regions where our 6 overseas offices play a critical role. Third, retaining a top-flight staff with appropriate subject matter, technical, and linguistic expertise in sufficient number to meet the ever-growing need for their unique knowledge. The library has always operated in a no-frills environment where the love of learning and its mission are our best recruitment and retention levers. But we must be able to give staff the necessary tools to do the best job possible and to keep their knowledge and skills at the cutting edge. We must be opportunistic when unique materials are made available to us and mindful that gaps in knowledge are difficult to fill after the fact, and even more so in a digital age. We must be able to protect the collections from vulnerabilities, including threats from environmental degradation caused by improper housing conditions and barriers caused by changes in technology. Played any 8-track tapes lately? Meeting these challenges is crucial to remaining on the visionary course Dr. Billington has set for us and the United States Congress has encouraged and enabled for over 200 years. The idea of the Library of Congress began with Thomas Jefferson and our other founding fathers, James Madison and John Adams, who envisioned, even in our nation's infancy, the uniquely American concept of a universal collection that embodies the Library of Congress as we know it today. Thomas Jefferson said, quote, "There is in fact no subject to which a member of Congress may not have the occasion to refer," end quote. At a time when this concept is increasingly prophetic, it would be impossible to sustain for Congress and the nation the knowledge base needed to be creative and competitive in this information-driven, globalized century. As budget reductions affect, but we hope only temporarily, our ability to acquire, make available, and preserve our collections. Thank you.
Ms. Schaefer, thank you, and we thank all of the witnesses. we now have time for committee members to ask questions of the witnesses. Each member is allotted 5 minutes to question you. To help us keep track of time, we'll also use the timing device on the witness table. We'll alternate back and forth between majority and minority. And I will begin and recognize myself for 5 minutes. Excuse me, Ms. Palante, I think I must have caught the same bug that you did. We won't copyright our voices this morning. Thank you. Ms. Lofgren has just given me a good little lozenge, so maybe that'll help me through. I'll ask this question starting, Ms. Schaefer, with you, since you're warmed up and all ready to go. From fiscal year 11 to fiscal year 12, the Library of Congress absorbed a 6.6 budget reduction. I don't have to tell you guys that. The library conducted a voluntary separation incentive program to achieve this reduction. In this fiscal environment, how is your service doing more with less? That's a question for each one of the four of you. And have you observed from your position that the budget cuts are affecting your ability to produce the quality of work required by us, the Congress? Ms. Schaefer.
I would say that these budget cuts, at least at this time, have had the effect of causing us, in a very good way, to collaborate more with each other, as well as with entities around the country and around the world. And so they have enabled us to step into more leadership roles within Library of Congress, helping to set standards and work in collaborative and cooperative acquisition programs. One of the things that we have noticed, however, is that the impact could very soon appear in our collections. As I mentioned in my testimony, both written and oral, it's very difficult once you are unable to acquire materials to then fill in those gaps. And this is our biggest concern for a short-term, hopefully, reduction that could actually have a very long-term impact.
Ms. Schaefer, thank you. Ms. Palante? Turn on your mic, please.
We've had a 22.7% reduction over the last couple of years and lost about 10% of our workforce. So in some ways, that's never a good result. In other ways, because I'm new and would have undertaken an evaluation regardless, the timing is acceptable in that I need to figure out how to plan for the future. So we have kept our heads above water in that we've kept the backlog at bay with registrations. What we're not doing is effectively maintaining our IT system, which underpins the entire electronic registration system. And we're not doing a lot of innovative projects that we are expected to do going forward. So
thank you, Ms. Palante. Dr. Masnet?
First of all, I'm committed to maintaining the quality of service to Congress. We are taking measures to work through the budget cuts. We are maintaining our analytical capacity on all the issues by asking analysts and attorneys and IPs, information professionals, to broaden their portfolios, take on new issues. But it does take time to get up to speed on those issues. We are also looking to take advantage of technology and to use it to create efficiencies and to make our service to Congress as effective as what it has been in the past. For longer term, we'll have to strategically think about how we want to reshape the workforce for a 21st century Congress.
Thank you, Dr. Masnek. Mr. Mao.
Thank you. As Ms. Schaefer mentioned, the collections are of utmost importance to us in the law library and library as a whole. And yes, the declining budgets will have an effect on the ability for us to acquire materials from around the world. That is one of the last places we would look to cut if we had to, because it is so important to keep that consistency and maintain the collections. The difficulty for us has been in retaining staff in certain areas. Last year, as part of the retirement program, for example, we had a senior specialist covering the area of Canadian law for us retire. And in the meantime, we have not been able to hire behind him to fill that position. So we've been relying on others in our foreign law among our foreign law specialists who have
Mr. Mao,
similar
thank you. I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want, in my remaining time, I did want to ask a question of Dr. Mazanek. Dr. Mazanek, CRS serves as the research arm of Congress and is tasked with providing objective, authoritative, and timely research. You state in your written testimony that one of the core values of CRS is non-partisanship. How do you, as head of CRS, attempt to ensure that the analysts are preparing reports that are, to the greatest extent possible, objective and free of any bias, any partisanship?
Thank you for this question. CRS takes several steps throughout the preparation of our products to ensure objectivity and to be true to our core values. At the very start, during the conceptualization phase, we involve analysts from across the service so that we get all the issues, all the different options identified. We then seek out and only use authoritative source material, which we draw from the library. We leverage the library resources. And finally, we have a very rigorous review process that consists of 4 different levels, starting with peer review, then research section review, then division review, and then finally agency review. As an additional check on some reports, we ask experts outside of CRS to look at near final text to make sure that it's technically accurate. We also try to foster a culture of objectivity and balance, both in how we train and work with our colleagues, but also in some of the policies that we have in place.
Dr. Mazanek, thank you. I've been a little generous with myself there and went over. Before I yield to the ranking member, let me tell my colleagues, since there are only 3 of us here, hopefully more members who had conflicts with other committee hearings and markups going on simultaneously to this hearing. If we don't have any other members come, we will have a second round. So be thinking about that as you frame your questions. And now I yield to the ranking member, my colleague, Ms. Lofgren, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Palante, according to the information provided to the committee by the library, you took a trip to Los Angeles in November of last year, and during that trip, you met with motion picture studio lawyers. Now, one day after you returned from LA, you testified before the House Judiciary Committee about the Stop Online Piracy Act and essentially endorsed the bill. SOPA was an extreme measure which blindly pursued copyright enforcement at the expense of many other considerations. And of course, as we're all aware, the bill sparked a massive protest from, some have said, 14 million Americans, and the bill did not proceed. Did you discuss SOPA in your meeting with the motion picture studio lawyers? Who attended the meeting? What subjects were discussed? What was the substance of the discussion?
Thank you, Ranking Member. Yes, in fact, that trip was cut short because of the hearing. I had to return early. I was out there for a bar association meeting, and whenever I'm out anywhere in any city other than Washington, I try to do side meetings to maximize my time. So in that case, that was a meeting that we set up. My general counsel and my associate registrar were with me for the purpose of reaching beyond the trade associations that normally visit us in Washington. So this is something that I've been advised to do in getting advice as a new registrar. Make sure you meet with the members of associations, not just the associations and their government relations people. So in that meeting, we talked primarily about the priorities and special projects document.
Who attended the meeting?
There were member company business lawyers there. So the lawyers of Warner Brothers, the lawyers of Paramount, the lawyers of major studios.
Would you provide later, obviously you don't recall the names, and that's fine, if you could provide a list of all the attendees at that meeting?
Yes, certainly.
To this hearing, that would be helpful. Now, did you discuss SOPA at that meeting?
Well, we discussed the priorities and special projects document and rogue websites because it was a priority for the leadership of judiciary is one of the priorities that I've had to make my own. And so, yes, in that context, it would have been one of many things we discussed.
In recent remarks published by the American Bar Association, you said the following, quote, "Copyright is for the author first and the nation second," unquote. Now, this comment attracted quite a bit of attention among some people, especially my constituents in Silicon Valley. And it seems to me, when you look at the Constitution, which empowers Congress to grant exclusive rights in creative works in order, and I quote, to promote the progress of science and the useful arts, it seems to me the Constitution is very clear that copyright does not exist inherently for the author, but for the benefit of society at large. Now, I'm concerned when any public official, especially one in charge of regulation of a particular industry or area of law, seems to favor particular stakeholders in that very industry. We'd be alarmed, for example, if the chairman of the FCC said the Telecommunications Act was for the telecom companies first and the nation second. And it's not clear to me how your statement, if it was accurately reported, is any different. So could you tell us what you meant by this statement and how this principle guides your work as registrar?
I would be delighted to. Thank you. So when I took the job, I was required to take an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the United States. The constitutional clause to promote the progress of science and the useful arts works in part by, quote, securing for limited times to authors their respective writings and discoveries. What I was doing in that interview, and you've extracted one sentence from a 4-page interview, was making the point that the Supreme Court has interpreted that clause, including in 2 recent decisions, Eldred and Golan, in the last year, that the limited monopoly goes first to authors so that they will produce, so that in the end, the public will benefit.
I think that's a real misstatement of the Eldred case. The Eldred case basically had to do with the jurisdiction of Congress. It didn't find that the benefit was to authors instead of society. It basically was a finding that Congress was not limited by the words for limited periods for the extreme measure that we've done now, life of the author plus 70 years. Let me ask you this. According to the information, well, my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask my other questions at the second round.
Oh, I thank the ranking member for yielding back, and I will now call on my colleague from Florida, Mr. Nugent, for 5 minutes.
Freshman during that training period, and we've reached out to CRS on a number of issues, and we've been very satisfied with the response from the Library of Congress and CRS in particular. But my question to you is, as we move forward, your relationship, CRS's relationship with the executive branch, have you been receiving all the information that we request in a timely manner?
The simplest answer is no. Excuse me. In a month's period, approximately 2 to 4 times, we have difficulty getting information from executive branch agencies. They either refuse to provide us with the information, or they give us incomplete or out-of-date information. Or they will ask us who the information is for and how it's going to be used. And we feel that by revealing that to them, that would breach our value of confidentiality. Right now, the current status of our authority is derived from the chair of a committee. We are agents of the committee, and that's how it's been interpreted. So that leaves out the ranking member and the other members of the committee and members in their own right. So there is, Representative Schock has a pending bill that would give the director of CRS the authority to seek information directly from the executive branch agencies if it's to respond to a request from a member and if the member approves. We think that this would make us better able to serve the Congress so that we can continue to provide a comprehensive, authoritative product to the Congress.
I would think that it shouldn't matter, what member it's for or who it's for, because you're really trying to give a independent, nonpartisan response, and that's all I ask for. And I would think no matter what side, whether it's majority or minority, we want to make sure that we get authority, in regards to a response. So we can make decisions as we move forward in legislation, and that really is a nonpartisan issue. And I know this is Mr. Schock's area of, in his wheelhouse right now, and he's not here, so I wanted to make sure to ask that question. But I would hope that the legislation that he's putting forward would receive bipartisan support, because this is a bipartisan issue. We depend upon CRS's objectivity to give us just good, solid information, because we can get information on a partisan side of it, and we don't want to necessarily make a decision based upon that. And so it really is about CRS's ability. The question that was directed to Ms. Palente, it's sort of like the chicken and the egg. In my take on it is that if authors or folks that provide a document or an idea and put it in writing, and that they want to make sure that there's some protection out there for them. Because if it wasn't for that, all of us, we wouldn't receive the information. It's possible they could do something different to keep it secretive, but we want it to be public knowledge. So is that kind of where you were leading in regards to trying to keep authors and those that, freedom of getting that out there and protection for them?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think in terms of copyright owners, they're not a monolith, right? You've got individual creators, authors, songwriters, artists. Then you've got big multinational companies who may also acquire copyrights. So in the context of the interview that I was questioned about, I was talking about authors and how not to lose them in the system. And I do believe that that's an important point for the Register of Copyrights to keep in mind.
I would think so. So we all have the ability to read particular information. So I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I'll yield back now. It's my time.
Mr. Nugent, thank you. We have time for a second round, so why don't we go ahead and get started on that, and let me ask the first question of the second round in my 5 minutes allotted to Mr. Mao of the Law Library. The Law Library, Mr. Mao, appears to be utilized more by the other two branches of government than by the Congress. Of all those who utilize the law library, what community is the greatest user?
It depends on the type of questions we receive. For the analytical and legal analysis provided by the foreign law specialists, when we serve the foreign government, it's approximately 1/3 to the Congress. One third to one half to Congress, and 1/3 to 1/2 of the executive branch, with a small minority of the remaining part to the judicial branch. Now, for the general reference questions that we receive in the reading room, the majority of those are for the public. We get a lot of questions, whether they be walk-up, through the telephone, or through electronic means, and we serve the public here in Washington, D.C., across the country, and around the world.
So the majority of inquiries are from the general public?
From those that are given to the reading room, yes.
Right. Ms. Schaefer, the Technology Policy Directorate of the library is housed within library services, right?
It is.
In 2010, the LOC acquired the rights to the entire Twitter archive. Do you feel like it's necessary to archive all Twitter traffic? And are you concerned that these limited resources that we've been talking about will be diverted to this archive that could be better used elsewhere?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I do, and I feel rather strongly that social media is an emerging media that we need to pay attention to. I believe that if we had forgotten about motion picture at the turn of the 20th century, we would deeply regret it today. And I don't want us to be in a position, or our legacy to be considered, that we totally did not think about important resources. In Twitter, there are enormous social trends that can be mined out that, frankly, might not be derived from any other resources. And so I think it would be highly irresponsible for the nation's library not to look at social media sources, data sets, and emerging new fields of
Well,
knowledge.
thank you for that honest and forthright answer. It just seems to me that making sure that we preserve Mr. Smith goes to Washington rather than a bunch of Twitter gossip by teenagers is you're not comparing apples to apples there. And if you want to comment on that, I'll give you a little more time to respond to my opinion on the issue.
Well, it may be very important as a social trend to know what teenagers were speaking about. We're always concerned about the knowledge base in America, and it may help us understand better things about civic education or preparing for a future generation of voters. So I do believe that these are important resources not to be excluded. And
Thank you very much. Let me go to Ms. Palante. The registration system is integral to the Copyright Office, is it not?
It is.
Right now, around 87% of the claims are done electronically. Do you feel prepared to adapt to an increase in electronic claims, and have you taken steps to prepare for an increase in electronic claims?
Thank you for the question. Yes and no. So the answer is yes, we have taken steps to prepare, but we do not believe that we're in shape to have the kind of technology and services that the copyright community expects of us. So for example, we can register what comes in. We're not sure the legal incentives for registration have kept pace with the law, meaning that we're not sure people are sure why they're registering anymore. If people don't register, the public databases won't be robust, and then the public and users and those who rely on the information won't have the information that they need. And the databases need major upgrades in searchability, including through the web, and the presentation of material that people want.
Ms. Palante, thank you. Dr. Mazanek, in my remaining few seconds, almost 90%, you talked about this actually in the 5 minutes that you gave us of your written testimony. Almost 90% of your budget is directed towards personnel. Recently, you have not filled several vacancies and had 22 others leave through this voluntary buyout program. CRS is currently operating at its lowest staff level in more than 3 decades. In fact, I think those were your words. How would you enact further reductions given the already low staff level, if that be necessary in these tough times?
That's a very good question. I think at this point what we're asking, as I said, what we're asking staff to do is take on additional issues and responsibilities. But we can only expand portfolios so far. I think the next, or one of the things we will have to consider is our breadth of services and which services, or how can we prioritize our services to make sure that Congress gets what they need or what is most valuable to them. And that's one of the reasons why I've been going around and speaking with members and senior staff. We are also looking at our operations, looking for...
Well, let me get, and my time's expired, and just real quickly, just getting back to the personnel issue, do you think you can continue in this environment with the current level of personnel and thinking maybe for the next couple of 3 years that it's not going to get any better, that we can still get the quality of work out of CRS that we have become accustomed to, certainly in the 9 years that I've been here?
I think we can. Now, I want to caveat that by the fact that it really depends on the issues that we are being asked to work on. And as the issues get more and more complex, we may need additional analytical capacity, or we may need to hire people that have specific expertise that we need.
Thank you all, and I thank my colleagues for indulging me with a little bit of overtime there. Let me turn to the ranking member, Ms. Lofgren, for her second round of 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Palante, you, according to the information provided to the committee, you had a meeting with the Authors Guild and the Association of American Publishers in New York between December 7th and December 9th of last year. Can you tell me who attended that meeting? What was the substance of the discussion, and was SOPA a topic of the meeting?
Yes, thank you. I remember the trip because my family came up to join me in New York, and we went to the Empire State Building at midnight on Saturday night, and Representative Goodlatte was there with his family, and my children said, "I can't believe we can't even go to the Empire State Building without you running into people you work with." But at that meeting, I had been asked by the Publishers Lawyers Committee, the in-house counsel for lawyers, people who work every day in copyright transactions and litigation, to come and speak. And again, whenever I take a trip, I try to do additional meetings to maximize my time. And so I met again with the business people who are in the Association of American Publishers, so not the lawyers, but the CEOs and business people, to talk again about the priorities of the Copyright Office. Then went and met with the Authors Guild, again, just to go over my priorities and special documents.
And was SOPA a subject of the discussion?
SOPA and PIPA were introduced at that point, so it would have been discussed in those terms, but in general, rogue websites have been a topic for the Copyright Office for a year.
Let me ask you to do this. You haven't mentioned the names of the people you met with, so let me ask you, in addition to the names of the people you met with in Hollywood, that you provide the names of the people you met with in New York, and if you could please, a summary of the topics discussed at each meeting. You know, like you, I love books, I love reading, but I'm also mindful that technological changes are evolving the dominant forms of creative work throughout our history, and they certainly are today. In recent remarks to the American Association of Publishers, you said that, and I assume this is correctly quoted, you cannot imagine the future without books and without publishers. Now, do you believe that the preservation of a particular form of copyright works or a particular industry business model is part of your mission as the Registrar of Copyrights? And if not, what did you mean by that comment?
Yeah, thank you. I was not discussing a particular format of books. I was talking about books. And in that speech, I had been asked to trace the history of copyright through books. It was the annual meeting of the members of the Association of American Publishers. And so I traced it from the time of the first Copyright Act in 1790 to the Golan decision, in which Justice Ginsburg repeated that her decision was based, in fact, on the framers' intent that dissemination of works was part of the copyright bundle. That was the point of my remarks.
Let me ask all of the witnesses about discrimination. We're aware, we've seen in the newspaper, of an allegation of an individual who asserts that he was fired because of his sexual orientation. Now, I won't get into that particular case because it's being investigated, but we have no tolerance here for discrimination in employment in violation of our laws. So I would like to know, what are each of you doing to make sure that the employees within your purview are not discriminated against based on race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation? I can start with you, Mr. Mel.
Thank you. The Law Library of Congress, and indeed the Library of Congress, believes very firmly that there should not be any discrimination, and believes in its mission to provide an environment where there is no discrimination. Now, specifically in the Law Library, one thing that I have done since taking on the position of Law Librarian is to ensure the proper training for the staff. So I've encouraged staff to participate in the classes that are available through the Library of Congress. And indeed, at one of the first management team meetings that I held in the Law Library, I invited representatives from our Office of Opportunity, Inclusiveness, and Compliance to come and brief our staff about the issue. And we're planning on making that session available to the staff as well. And
thank you. Dr. Mazanek, and all of you, if you could be brief, that would be good because I'm running out of time.
Very specifically, we try to address any issues around discrimination as rapidly as we can. We also try to educate our employees about workplace discrimination, and also educate our managers. Diversity is highly valued at the library. It makes us do our job better.
I just repeat everything that my colleagues have said. I have also instituted supervisory training, and I have an open door policy, which my staff have taken advantage of.
And I guess I'll add a fourth voice to all of that, but I will also say that I think it's important that our collections are so diverse, and they reflect such diverse cultures that in a sense we have the environmental underpinning for diversity there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is expired.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. Second round for 5 minutes for Mr. Nugent.
Dr. Mazanik, you had mentioned that you forecast. I'd like to hear more about how you forecast in regards to the needs of Congress, and how do you get that?
I think you're referring to our legislative planning process. Right. We do this as an annual basis. We rely on our analysts and attorneys who have been working with the committees and with congressional staff to help identify the issues that Congress will be focused on in the upcoming session. We then vet that list with leadership offices and with our oversight offices to make sure that we have captured all the issues, that we haven't missed anything. So that's how we start our planning process for our research materials, the products, and the services that we provide.
Does that translate into how many folks you're going to wind up putting in a particular area based upon the complexity of the issue? Or?
We try to do that to the best of our ability, but people come in with specific expertise, so they can't always move very easily from an issue area to another issue area. And some of the expertise has been developed over decades. But we are looking at creating more surge capacity, more cross coverage, so that we can supplement the lead analysts in a given issue area that is really hot.
And given, this is to all of you, given the cutbacks that you've all faced in regards to personnel and retirements, how are you growing leaders within specific areas? And Mr. Mao, I don't know that you have a second in command at this point in time, but how are you going to grow leaders, particularly in this austere budget time? Yes, sir.
We have various training programs available. One of the ones that we've started is, for example, in our reading room, we have what we're calling our Reading Room Management Training Fellowship, where we're encouraging the reading room staff to gain supervisory experience. We've also encouraged our members to take details. For example, we have one member of the Law Library staff who is working with the House Appropriations Committee currently on a detail to gain supervisory experience in a context outside of the library, but still related to the library.
Dr. Mann.
Very quickly, I would echo all of that. We also have some recruitment programs where we target bright young individuals coming out of school, law recruit, grad recruit. In the PMF program, the Presidential Management Fellows Program, we bring them on board, educate them, train them, give them opportunities to develop their skills.
That's plenty.
And I have a lot of cross-departmental projects at the moment, and am using those to identify leaders. And I have actually had several people retire after many decades at the Copyright Office, and so younger people will be stepping up to fill those jobs.
Thank you.
We're doing a lot of what our colleagues are doing in library services, but we are also creating now a very robust mentoring and coaching program within the service unit. And then we are reaching out to colleges and universities all over the country to help us identify people who are graduating from college and might be interested or have knowledge of cultures and language skills, because that is a critical issue for library services.
One more question. As it relates to the Legislative Information System, it's now in its 16th year of existence, and Thomas, who's been around now 18 years, how do they fit within Library of Congress information architecture and strategies as you move forward? Is there talk about merging the two, or is there some other ways? Mr. Mao.
Yes, the data underneath is essentially the same, and right now the Library of Congress is working very hard on updating the information architecture for the Thomas system, and is looking forward to launching a new system that will integrate all of this information in one place.
Very good.
I don't have anything to add except that CRS has been actively involved in collaborating with the other service units to modernize our legislative information system.
I would think that would definitely be the way forward, particularly in these times where we have less personnel. Anytime we can collect information and then disseminate it in a way that's useful would be great. I yield back to balance my time.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent, and now yield to the gentleman from Indiana. And this is his first round, so Todd, you can go beyond the 5 minutes and take up to 10 if you wish.
Oh my.
Mr. Rakita from Indiana.
It's wonderful to be on House Admin, treated this way. My apologies for being late with multiple hearings today that I was scheduled to attend. I thank the witnesses for their testimony, and my apologies for not being able to hear at all. If I ask a question that's already been addressed by another member, would you please tell me so I can move on, and I'll go back to the transcript to get that answer. That requires a two-way street, right? It has to be, you got to think of that as if being answered in my mind, not yours. But I think we can accomplish that today. First to Ms. Palente. Do the library's cost to process a claim vary depending on the type of work?
Well, that is a great
book, movie, or
question.
piece.
Meaning, does it cost more to register a motion picture than it does a song, for example?
Yeah, a book versus a movie or a piece of software, something like
Yes. So that is one of the focal points of a fee study that we're undertaking right now, which
Okay.
is something that I'm in the middle of is in my first year as register.
And what-
I would suspect the answer is yes.
And when is that fee report going to be due then, or that analysis going to be done?
It will be done and delivered to Congress this summer,
Okay,
and then if Congress approves, would be implemented in fiscal 2013.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question, according to your recent fee report notice, in fiscal year 2011, fee receipts covered 59% of the costs. You said this was insufficient by any standard. Certainly it would be in the private sector. What standard would be sufficient?
Again, that's a really good question. As I understand it, the office fees for services have never covered the entire cost, and in part that is because, at least in recent decades, copyright registration is a voluntary system, and in the end, meaning that as an author you don't have to register, or as a motion picture company, to get legal protection under copyright law. It's automatic. There are benefits, and we try to entice people to register, but we do that because the public database is actually good for other industries who may rely on that information for innovation, and for the public who needs to find a copyright owner. So it's a little bit of a circle, and we have to hit the sweet spot essentially with the fee study. But I do believe that we have been not recovering enough of the fees for services.
And just so I'm clear, do you have a solution for that or not? You're saying no. Is there I can't believe I'm asking you this. Do you think there'd be a legislative solution to that?
Well, I rely on the law when I do the fee study. I have parameters that are set in the Copyright Act, and they require that I be fair and equitable and give due consideration to the objectives of the copyright system, which, and the discussion that you missed, is that in part the copyright system is for authors, and in part it is for the public. So we need to take all of that into account, and therefore I think one answer is we probably will never be 100% fee recovery, but we need to do better.
Okay, I'll look at the transcript
Okay.
as well. Thank you. According to, I think that same fee report notice, you recovered 64% of the cost to process an online claim, but only 58% of the cost to process paper applications. So with adoption of a new fee structure, what percentage of the costs are you anticipating recovering in both those?
I'm hesitant to
categories?
give you an answer only because we're in the middle of a public fee Federal Register process, and I have to wait for the results of that before we do the final analysis for Congress. So I don't want to prejudge what the public's comments are going to be in terms of what the right results should be.
That would imply that you actually weight the comments.
Yeah.
Something that
Actually read them and analyze them. And
wow.
incorporate them.
I don't mean to be flippant, but there is I'm finding, and this comes from a guy who used to run a couple agencies in the state of Indiana at one time. When I ask other agency heads or decision makers about their formula or their process for analyzing comments, they don't have one, which you can come back and say, well, that's our discretion under the Constitution, but I don't think that's an insufficient answer. So I appreciate that non-answer you gave me. What planning, I'm trying not to just to pick on you, but I think this will be the last one for you. What planning has the Copyright Office engaged in the event the copyright royalty judges are deemed unconstitutional, something I'm just learning about? Do you have a plan? What if these judges are found unconstitutional?
Well, I don't have a plan, but there would be implications for the register, for sure.
Yeah. Well, do you think you need to start thinking of one, or do you be pretty confident that they are constitutional, and if so, why?
Well, I know the Department of Justice is representing the library in that ongoing litigation. I probably shouldn't comment on pending litigation.
Anyone else want to comment? No? Okay. Ms. Schaefer, let's see. Oh, yes. Currently, 17 studio and movie-related entities store material at the library's National Audiovisual Conservation Center in Culpeper. You're familiar, obviously. Yeah. Assuming the center had authority to charge depositors for cost recovery, storage, and preservation fees, what do you envision for the center? Are there other institutions who have offered to collaborate? Is there available space if more entities want to establish a relationship with Culpeper?
Well, let me start by saying that we would be able to create the space. We don't currently have it, but we have some fixed shelving in Culpeper, and our plan for this deposit program would be to install compact shelving, movable shelving, so that would create a significant increase in our available space.
Are you promoting this relationship opportunity?
We are trying to. We have a number of registries that you created for us, and we have spoken to people who participate in the deliberations on those registries. Often they are connected to or coming from industry. And so we've been trying to explain to them what our plan is in a very objective way, thinking that this will provide service not only to them, but also assure the longevity and preservation of many of the materials that they possess and really don't have the technical ability to handle. I think that's the key issue.
Well, and just so we're clear, I'm clear on your answer. If you had the authority to charge depositors for cost recovery, how would you handle that?
Well, we would use it as, we would institute it under a revolving fund so that we could then use the monies that we would collect to improve the preservation and conditions of the materials that we would be taking in.
100%?
Yes, I believe it would be. We would include in that, however, a number of staff positions so that they could be dedicated to preserving these materials as well as developing scientific know-how for all other materials.
Have you just thought about fee structure and fees and percentages of recovery, that kind of thing? Or?
We are actually right now in the process of looking at what the marketplace might bear, and we expect to have that again by the summer. So we're looking at it as we speak.
I would expect the marketplace would bear a lot.
Well, it would be cost recovery, so.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to profit, but getting to 100% would be nice, or closer to.
Oh, it would be lovely, for sure.
All right. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Urquidez. Let me say that to our witness, first of all, thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you, and I thank the members as well. Ms. Lofgren had a conflicting markup, so she had to leave a few minutes early. Before I adjourn the committee, though, let me just say that it's possible that committee members, maybe even some that couldn't attend at all, they may have some follow-up questions for the witnesses, and would you all please respond to these written questions, assuming there are some, in a timely manner. The committee members would greatly appreciate that. But I do thank in each and every one of you the positions that you hold, 4 of, what is it, 7 or 9, but you represent 40% or more of the budget for the Library of Congress, and certainly we, the members, understand the importance and do realize the constraints that you're under, and are very likely to continue to be under in regard to being able to provide the same level of service with fewer people and with a tightened budget. I know that's very, very difficult for each and every one of you, and what you do is hugely important, and I think that was pointed out pretty clearly during the hearing and your testimony and the Q&A, 2 rounds of Q&A. So I feel, as Chairman of the Subcommittee of Oversight and Investigation, that we certainly have had a very good hearing in regard to the Library of Congress. And again, thank you all. At this point, I'll declare that this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.